honor to be here. You are actually in my neighborhood right now. I live in Liberty Station, so if you need to know anything about it, you can ask me. You could also ask my 6- and my 7-year-old who think they are the mayor and deputy mayor of Liberty Station. They duke it out for that title, those titles with anybody. But this is a remarkable place. This is a remarkable testament to design in a lot of ways. And I think more importantly to me, it's a remarkable testament to the thought behind design. And I want to talk a little bit about that today. When I was asked to speak, the thing that I was asked to talk about is creating a design-driven innovation economy, or using design as a key component for creating an innovation economy. When we talk about our economy in San Diego in the simplest of terms, and this really is an overly simplified narrative, but to try to make people outside of this region grasp who we are, we really talk about 3 main economic pillars or engines in San Diego. One being tourism. I'm sure you and a lot of people that you know first learned about San Diego being a tourist. The second thing is the military. It is, in fact, the military that brought me here, not the way that most people think when I tell them that. My wife is a very decorated military officer, and we came here 17 years ago and never looked back. From Boston, another great city, my home my whole life, but San Diego is my home now. And then the third thing is innovation. And the really remarkable thing about the innovation economy is this region has sort of just willed itself onto the map in that space in a different way than other places. So like I said, I grew up in Boston. And in Boston, you have hundreds of years of history of those universities being leading universities. And universities, in the places around universities, is where innovation thrives. And so San Diego had to really put itself on the map like 50 years ago to really kind of become a region that could compete in this space. So just think of how quickly, in the grand scheme of things, San Diego has become a key space in the innovation market. And I would actually argue, and my good friend and mentor, Dwayne Roth, who if any of you knew Dwayne, he was the CEO of Connect before he passed away, and he did a lot of other remarkable things in San Diego. But Dwayne used to talk to us all the time about how we have the most diverse innovation economy anywhere in the country here in San Diego. So we may not have the biggest of anything. We may not be the biggest software scene. We may not be the biggest biotech scene. We may not be the biggest of any of those key clusters. But we have more of them than anybody, whether it's clean technology, whether it's sports innovation, all of these things, because there's an entrepreneurial spirit in San Diego that has kind of driven that for a long, long time. People constantly inventing something, getting to a certain place, and then reinvesting and inventing other things. And that's the story of San Diego. So when I thought to get up here today, and I'm going to be quick, I'm looking at my monitor, and I know that we're a little bit behind, so I promise I'll get you all to your break on time. The first person I called when I was thinking about this presentation is my friend Stacy Pennington, who's in the back. And if any of you know Stacy, and I'm sure many of you do, I tend to think of her as sort of the spirit behind the entire downtown movement in San Diego. She's the person who has helped with all of the planning and the development around Maker's Quarter, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But she's somebody who first walked into my office to have conversations with me about the current and future state of spaces and places, and the design of those spaces and places, and how that matters not just to a millennial workforce, but how that matters to families, how that matters to economies, how that matters to diverse communities. That if we go to the best cities of the world, we go to the best places in the world and see the best economies in the world, they're unmistakably beautiful places, and really well thought out places. And when they haven't thought something out well, they're pretty honest about it. They can point it out to you and show it to you. So the thought behind the design of spaces and places is kind of what I want to talk to you about today. Because I cannot pretend to be an expert on the innovation economy and go really deep into any one part of that sector without really kind of needing to bring up somebody who runs companies in that sector and who's been an entrepreneur in that sector and who does that work and grinds it out day in and day out. But what I do, what I can share with you are the things that matter to people when we talk to them about coming to San Diego, staying in San Diego, building a business here, finding the workers that they need, retaining those workers, and so on. And so the first thing I did is I called Stacy, and Stacy does what all great thinkers and planners do. She sketched out for me what my presentation should look like. And she shot it over to me in a text. And so I figured one of the best ways is to kind of start with just that, is to really think through as we're thinking about our economy in San Diego. We don't need to look around very far to find places in this economy where we can look back and say, God, why did we design something that looked like that at some point in time? What decades did people just kind of suddenly say, it doesn't matter what our innovation economy looks like. You're a brilliant scientist, but who cares what the setting looks like that you work in, or what your drive to work looks like, or what the building looks like? or what the center of your campus looks like. But we all know that we could find those places and point them out pretty easily here and in other places around the country, but San Diego had a lot of that. For a place that is the birthplace of California, which we actually are, this is where California began. This is where sort of the spirit and the idea of California began. And people don't remember that and they don't know that. We suddenly look like a place that kind of lost some of its history along the way and then kind of rebuilt it in this funky 70s, 80s sort of time frame. And then suddenly we're looking back on it now and saying, we need to project better than that. And I can tell you right now that when you're a region that's competing with not just Silicon Valley and the Bay Area, not just Austin and Seattle, not just Boston and New York, but London and Tokyo and the great cities of the world for the talented people who can move and go wherever they want, and the businesses that are increasingly global and can be wherever they want, design matters a lot. And it's going to only matter a lot more in the future. So we started talking and we kind of said, okay. So at certain points in time, when you came to San Diego and we talked to you about a campus or a place that you could be, we said, do you imagine yourself here? Wouldn't this be awesome, right? Look at that. Heart of our innovation economy. And again, incredible work by incredible people done there for a long time. And I don't know how many of you know Alexandria Real Estate, but Alexandria Real Estate is just that. They're a real estate company. And they're not just here in San Diego. They almost specifically focus on the life sciences. They know a great deal about that market in the Bay Area, in Boston, in San Diego, and in other places, where we really are the three major capitals of the scientific excellence in this country and even in this state that's so critical to our overall economy across the country. But they basically said the people who are doing that work, the people who are thinking of the scientific breakthroughs and building off of the science that's already there and thinking through the future, they want to walk into a place that looks like this every day, right? And behind it, they want a campus that they can kind of walk out on and be part of it. And if it's not urban, that's fine. It's awesome if it is urban, but if it isn't, let's create some of the things that an urban environment gives you. So at least the experience of the 8, 10, 12 hours a day that people spend in the workplace is not reflective of that first photograph, which might be a little soul-crushing to some, but it's reflective of this, and that the spaces inside are thought through the same way. So it's not just exteriors, it's really kind of the overall experience. And so again, kind of looking down from above, the heart of the Torrey Pines Mesa, right? I mean, this incredible place where I'd stand that up against any great innovation district anywhere in the world. But really wanting to make sure that when people see it and they're comparing and contrasting it to other places, we're really making sure that they're seeing that there's some thought into the experience that you're going to have when you're part of it now and in the future. And so much of the work that we do, and we're not a real estate organization, and just the look and feel of a business is not enough alone, but the message that it sends to somebody when you think through what their break time could look like, when you think through what their experiences of working with each other look like, what do you want your office to look like? Do you even care if you have an office these days? What do you want your work environment to be like is so critical and so important to the young people who are going to be powering this industry and other key industries long in the future, that there has to be the thought behind the design. And so a couple of other things that are interesting here in San Diego. So our urban core and our urban landscape, downtown San Diego, is kind of interesting and different because it's behind, right? We've seen these resurgences in great metros across the country. We've seen places that are well thought through already, kind of rethinking themselves and who they are. But this huge magnetic pull to the urban core. I mean, San Francisco has always been San Francisco. It's always been pretty amazing. But just what's happened down there with its economy and sort of what's happened around it, and God, what's happened with housing prices, and all of that has really kind of changed significantly the urban experience. But San Diego is still a little bit of a canvas that you could still paint on, so to speak. There's an awful lot. When we actually just recently put a proposal forward to Amazon, and everyone asks us about this, and it was an interesting project to be at the spearhead of with about 25 key partners, a lot of whom are in this room. You always want to give a company like Amazon not just one option, but multiple options. Because Amazon, you read that RFP, they didn't tell you what they really wanted. They told you what you had to have. And they said, then you kind of tell us from there what's special and unique about your region. One of the things that was special and unique for us was being able to say to them, we may not have one campus in downtown San Diego that you could drop 8 million square feet into the middle of, or even 500,000 square feet kind of right off the bat. But you know what we have? We have a place that you could walk every day of the year, unlike you can in other cities, a block or two to the next building, you could have an innovation trail through downtown San Diego that works its way from East Village with all the interesting things that are happening out there all the way down to the waterfront and back, and give them a unique opportunity to really be part of that changing landscape. And so what you're looking at right here is a vacant lot. But for those of you who've been there, you probably know it as Silo and the Maker's Quarter, because this is a place that has become an event spot for a lot of us in San Diego. When we celebrate, something that just happened in the business community, or we're trying to bring smart people like you together so that they get kind of some downtime to talk about both business and life, this is one of the places that someone like Stacy Pennington says, I look at it, I see a sand lot. Stacy looks at it and says, imagine what it could be, right? Imagine what it could be if we could get some artists from the region to really make it look like a great urban space. And I'm like, God, would people go? And they go all the time. And they've been going there for events for a long time. And it has just been one of many things that's not an office building. That's not Alexandria's work. That's not kind of tearing down the old and building up the new. That's just taking something that's there and saying, I think people would like this if we kind of made it an experience for them that would kind of captivate their interest and draw them in and keep them there. And so these are the types of things that people have been doing in downtown San Diego that's giving it sort of this edgy feel that people are really kind of buying into. So what if we could go a whole tier higher in how we think about the thought behind design, right? So I told you that the three pillars of our economy, when we're talking about it to the rest of the world, are innovation, defense, military, and tourism. But unmistakably, if you did my work for a living, if you fielded 100 phone calls that came into the San Diego Regional EDC along with our team, 1 in 4 of them would be asking you about Mexico in some way, shape, or form. Now that dialogue has changed a lot over the past year and a half, and I'll get to that in a moment. But for the 6 years that I've been at the San Diego Regional EDC, it's unmistakable that if there's a fourth pillar of our economy, it's Mexico, and it's our proximity to the border. And when we gave that look to Amazon of what makes San Diego special and unique, you bet we told them that they could have an option to have a binational campus right down on the border. Who else could offer them that other than this region? Who else could put the thought behind the design of that sort of asset for them? So here's the interesting thing. A small city crosses that border in both directions every day to work, for commerce, for culture, for tourism, for friendship, for all those things. Forget everything else that we hear about the border. Every day. Biggest problem we have is trying to get back across that border. Cars idling at the border, all of you, heads are nodding right now. We've all done it, right? You go down to Tijuana or the Guadalupe Valley or any of the wonderful things that are right down the road from us, and it's like your 25, 30-minute drive down and then your God knows what drive back. Well, imagine if you are a business and you're kind of thinking, wow, San Diego, what a great distribution point for North America, innovation economy, and then I can do my manufacturing right down the road. You go visit, you see all that, and then suddenly you realize it could take your trucks 3 hours to get back across that border. So instead, here's what we have folks talking about when it comes to our border. And if you don't know what the image is behind me, I could call it a lot of things. But what I will call it is the prototypes that are being put up to build a wall on that border. And by the way, for those of us who have been down there, we know that there's already a wall. And we know that there's a lot of walls. We've done nothing to make it easy to cross that border, and if there is some surge of pride in thinking that we could make it harder, make no mistake about it, it will hurt San Diego a lot. So we could have our best minds thinking about the prototypes to make that traffic move back across the border efficiently, to make the experience of moving from country to country, from San Diego to Tijuana, from the US to Mexico, to make that economic and cultural opportunity even stronger. And that's what we need maybe a lot of you to be thinking about with us, is not just the spaces in our urban core that people gather, and maybe not just the spaces that people work day in and day out, and kind of making those more interesting and unique and more conducive to what they need, but helping us think through the urban planning and the geographic planning and the socioeconomic planning of our time. Our economy in the future is going to be beholden to downtown. No mistake about it. What happens down there is going to be critical. Our economy in the future is going to be really beholden to the types of spaces that we create that continue to make people feel like that this is an economy and a place that they want to be part of. It's going to be beholden, no mistake about it, to the border. And so we need our design community leaning into that as much as we need our design community leading into products and things of that nature. And I would love to talk to lots of you about opportunities to be part of that. But there's one more place. that I just want you to think about as we think about what we're beholden to in our future, what decisions we could make today, how we could design things the right way, how we could make something for the next 50 or 100 years critical and important to our region, okay? Right? We all know this site. Beautiful, isn't it? I mean, look at that. 8 times a year, a football team went there, and I'm a huge football fan. I'm not trying to be dismissive of football. 8 times a year, a football team went to play there. A couple times a year, a concert would be there. SDSU would play some games there. Maybe every 5 to 10 years, we might get a Super Bowl. And we took all of that land to create that, because that's what cities and regions did for a long time, and interestingly enough, continue to do. Like, how much can we throw at the NFL to beg you to kind of come into our region and take up that much land and make the kind of money that you make? And people say to me, wow, San Diego's image must be weaker globally because we lost the Chargers. We just got back from London and Cambridge and had a remarkable visit with 25 key leaders in San Diego, spearheaded by Congressman Scott Peters. And you know the one thing nobody asked us about? Is if we lost the Chargers. Everybody asked us about our president, but nobody asked us if we lost the Chargers. And so here's the interesting thing, Mission Valley. Think of the Torrey Pines Mesa. Think if the wrong decisions had been made there. Think of the great cities and economies and urban environments that you all have lived in and been part of. What if the wrong decisions were made there? Should this be SDSU's campus? Should this be where Amazon goes? Should this be an incredible river park? What should this be? Well, right now, what we have is we have a handful of people who have a proposal, just putting it on the table and saying it should be this. But I would argue that we probably don't have the best design minds in our region thinking about that, and we could use that. So I'll end with this, which is the place to me that embraces design and the thought behind design better than any other place I've ever walked into. Because Jonas Salk could have built this anywhere, and we don't entirely know why he chose San Diego. Might have been the weather. Could have been a whole host of reasons. But he could have just had anyone build it instead of bringing in the best architect of our time to think it through and think of a place where he hoped the best and brightest minds of the world would not just come to work, but to be inspired every day. And as cool as that image is on the outside that we see all the time and we think of, go inside it sometime if you haven't been inside it. Take a tour through, and before we ever had incubators or accelerators or any of those things or walls that moved, they had it. They had it because they thought about it. Tables that configure it in all kinds of interesting ways so that if there was 4 of us that needed to have a meeting at 9, we could, and then we could broaden it out so 15 of us could have it later, and you could move that wall and write on that glass and all of that stuff decades ago because they put the thought behind the design. And it is a showplace today in a mesa that is a showplace of scientific discovery. But the spirit of that place and the spirit of the people who thought it through before they designed it is what we need more of today. And I think from everything I hear from Don Norman and everything I see from the folks who put on a wonderful event like this that we get to be part of, I know we have that talent sitting in the room. And I know that we can think through those places that are going to be so critical to San Diego's economy now and in the future. And what we like to say about San Diego is when we talk to folks around the globe about who we are, when we ask them what they know about San Diego, 2 words come back to us over and over and over again in different ways. One is life, and one is changing. The life sciences, the quality of life, the amazing outdoor lifestyle, or it's a city that's always changing, game-changing, healthcare changing, biotechnology changing the world. So when we think about San Diego these days, we want them to think of those pillars that we talked about. We want them to think about an amazing place to be, and we want them to know that if you come here, you can be part of something that is truly life-changing. And that's my message. So thank you all.